Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and 2025 is looking like it's going to be a really interesting year in the Pokemon TCG. And every year there's new stuff that happens, and there are some things that are happening this year that are really cool, and I'm really excited to talk about them. But the first thing is the new card Badoo. This is from the expansion, well, this is a proxy, but it's from the expansion Prismatic Evolutions. This is a mini set, so it doesn't have that many good cards. It has a bunch of cards, but it's a really bad set. Like it's actually kind of terrible, unfortunately. But it is bringing in Badoo, which is a really good card and is going to have a potentially substantial impact on the metagame. It's a card that, based on how much this card's out in Japan, if you don't know, and based on how much play it's seen there, it's seen a bunch. It's not a card that's played in multiple copies, maybe two copies, often one copy, but in a wide array of decks. Specifically, I know it's played a lot in Dragapult, but Badoo's a really interesting Pokemon because it's a baby Pokemon. This isn't, I don't think it's an official term, but you have baby Pokemon like Cleffa's the one right now in Standard that sees a bunch of play internationally. Badoo sees a lot of play in Japan. And Badoo and Cleffa and all baby Pokemon have 30 HP, a free attack, no retreat, and also are potentially like really strong because of these attributes. But except for the low HP. Low HP means they're very vulnerable. So if your opponent is playing Badoo, then keep in mind you can knock this out pretty easily, but you need to be equipped to do so. Because Badoo has its attack, Itchy Pollen, as I said, it is free, and it says during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards. It also does 10 damage. The 10 damage, as far as I'm aware, is pretty irrelevant. Obviously, it's, I guess, kind of nice to be able to do damage. You're probably trying not to get a Pokemon stuck in the active. That's not going to be your game plan. So it's not like you'd rather not be doing the damage. So I guess 10 is better than nothing. But ultimately, obviously, it's only 10 damage. So not that much. But ultimately, item block is really strong, and it allows you to completely shut off what your opponent's able to do, kind of like how Ability Lock can with Iron Thorns EX. They turn off different things, but I think it's a similar level of effectiveness, except the fact that Iron Thorns EX is an ability and it needs to be in the active. Badoo is an attack, so they function somewhat differently. Badoo, obviously, not applying offensive pressure, even if you do pair this with a Pokemon like Frostlass or Dusknoir, as we have seen with something like Banette EX or um, Venomoth, which are somewhat similar. They're not exactly the same, but they are decks that are they're actual decks. Badoo's not its own deck. So this is a card though that I think we'll see a lot of play because it's only one copy in a deck. You can put it in very easily, and you can find it. And also, well, theoretically, you can find it. If your opponent is playing Badoo, then you can't find your basics easier. So if you want to play counters to Badoo, don't make them reliant on items to find them from your deck. So keep that in mind. Badoo's a card that is coming before rotation, and it's, as I said, in Prismatic Evolutions, which is in like 2 weeks, something like that. And that set's going to be, Badoo is really the set, I feel like, and so that's something to keep an eye out for. But that card's been talked about a lot. But then with rotation itself, this has also been talked about a lot, but I think there's a lot more to say here. If you don't know what rotation is, every single year now it's at the beginning of the year with the first main expansion of the year. The cards here, it says the cards with the regulation mark F will rotate out. So for example, if we take a look at Charizard Pidgeot, then you can see the card. Oh yeah, for some reason my internet's slow. That's awesome. You have the card Thornton. Thornton's not that good, but Thornton is a card. You see the little F here, the lower left-hand corner. It's going to be rotating. You can't play it. If you take a card like Bidoof and Bibarel as well, every Sword and Shield card will be rotating. One, I guess, exception. If you take a look at the card Boss's Orders. Oh, Boss's Orders, was this printed with an F regulation mark? I don't think it was, but um, oh, apparently it was. So this card is not rotating though because it was printed newer in Palea Evolved, which has a G regulation mark. So keep in mind there are a handful of cards like Professor's Research, Boss's Orders, Ultra Ball, and those cards aren't rotating, but pretty much all the Pokemon that are Sword and Shield era are rotating, and pretty much all the trainers as well. This is going to impact the game a bunch. We'll talk about some of these specifics in just a moment, but keep in mind that's what rotation is. The reason for rotation, if you don't know, is to keep the game. Some people say it's so Pokemon makes more money. To be honest, I don't think this is really the reason that the Pokemon does this, because they make most of their money off of collectors, like by far most of it. But ultimately, it allows the game to be more it can allow the game to be more accessible to newer players because it's hard to get older cards. Getting cards from 5 years ago isn't necessarily that hard, but getting cards from base set it is hard. So, like base set of the first Pokemon TCG set, not like base Sword and Shield or base Scarlet and Violet. So that's partially why they do it, and also keeps the game fresh, and it means that they don't need to ban cards. And we do see power level changes, but that works because of rotation in the Pokemon TCG. Also, sorry if there's any background noise. I don't think there is, but there might be. But yeah, this will be Brilliant Stars through Silver Tempest, as well as Crown Zenith, I guess. Crown Zenith is a mini expansion, kind of like what Prismatic Evolutions is, and most of the cards are reprints, so a lot of them have rotated already, but keep that in mind. There are a few weird exceptions, and there are also some cards that aren't rotating that don't do anything. For example, Choice Belt, it doesn't do anything, which is kind of unfortunate. I don't actually know why it's still in the game, but it is so, and it will be, and it won't do anything. But regardless, there are a bunch of cards here. I'm looking at Pokebeach, and there's a bunch. There are a few cards here that are meaningful that are rotating. Looking at the top of the meta, obviously, I said that Charizard is losing, or was losing Thorin, it's losing a few cards, most notably for Sealstone. This is a really big loss for it, and or it's a pretty big loss. Rotom V and Lumineon V as well, and then obviously Regidrago V-Star. You can't play that at all. It's just rotating. Um, Lost Zone decks you can't play at all. You could theoretically play some of the attackers like Pikachu EX or Iron Hands EX. Blood Marshal EX will still certainly be good post rotation, but not really sure how you'd play Pikachu EX post rotation or Iron Hands EX. You could find some way, especially Iron Hands EX because Miraidon is not rotating, but Lost Zone is a strong deck that is rotating. We'll also be losing Lugia V-Star, which is a pretty good deck. We're losing Snorlax, which is also a good deck, and we're losing Palkia, Origin Form Palkia V-Star, and I'm sure there's some other cards like the Regis. The Regis aren't very good, but ultimately there's a bunch of cards we're losing. And then within some of these other decks, we are losing Kirlia from the Gardevoir deck, which is a pretty big deal, as well as Radiant Greninja, also Pokestop, which is played in some of these decks, and we are also losing like Trekking Shoes is a card we're losing, which is kind of part of the Turbo package. I'd say the Turbo package is Radiant Greninja, Squawkabilly EX is a big part, which we aren't losing, but Radiant Greninja, um, Trekking Shoes, Pokestop, things like that you're losing, and that's theoretically big. Switch card, isn't as big. Some of these losses aren't as important, but there are some big losses. I feel like this rotation is bigger than some, and so just keep that in mind. And at some point, I'll be talking a bit more about post rotation, but just keep in mind that probably don't try to buy don't buy Regidrago V-Star now. Pokemon's giving out Regidrago V-Star for free on the ladder. I don't really know why they're doing that. Not that it's bad, because it's very good, but ultimately it's a deck that won't be playable literally at all after rotation, because you can't play Regidrago V-Star. So do keep that in mind. And this will be coming out here. It says April 11th. This is, I believe, for competitive Pokemon. So if you're playing casually, then rotation will be, well, it's when the new set drops, which would be, I believe, 2 weeks before. I don't remember the exact date. But regardless, on Pokemon TCG Live, for example, it'll be at the end of March. And as I said, this is with Journey Together, which is the next thing we have to say. And Journey Together is the first, I'd say it's the first expansion of the year. It's not exactly. Obviously, we were just talking about Prismatic Evolutions, which is actually the first set of the year. We were talking about regulation marks. This will be the Journey Together cards will be the first cards with regulation mark. Um, I that's not regulation mark I, but here we go. Ends Zorua here, which is blurry, has regulation mark I, and this is introducing trainers Pokemon. This is really exciting. I think. I mean, to be honest, the trainers Pokemon mechanic is not the most interesting mechanic. It's kind of fun thematically, definitely it is, but ultimately in terms of gameplay changes, it's not really that different than future Pokemon or ancient Pokemon or um, like Rapid Strike or something like that. But it is still kind of cool to see. If you're a fan of one of these trainers, it's really cool to see. In the first expansion of the year, Journey Together, we'll be getting 4 trainers, receiving trainers Pokemon and support cards for those. And you have Iono with like Belly Bolt EX, and or Iono's Belly Bolt EX. It is a separate Pokemon from regular Belly Bolt EX in terms of name, which is Probably bad for the card, but still, that is a thing. You're getting N with N's Zoroark. EX is the main card. Hop with Hop Zashi next, as well as some other cards. And also Lily with Lily's Clefairy EX. And I think the Hops deck is going to be really great. We haven't seen that much from the Lily's deck. We've seen a little, which so I don't know how good that will be, but I think it will be decent. But we really do need to wait and see for that one. The ends deck looks mediocre. It looks decent, but not amazing. I'm not exactly sure how good it is, but I think it's solid. And then the Ionis deck, it definitely looks like the weakest of the three that have gotten the most cards so far, but it has gotten less cards than the ends and hops deck. So do consider that, but I don't think the Ionis deck is going to be super great. I mean, we just haven't seen anything particularly impressive from it so far. We've seen some synergistic pieces, but nothing that screams amazing. And this is definitely an interesting year because this is like a new mechanic, but we'll be getting another new mechanic. Also, some of the trainers, so we're confirmed to be getting exactly four trainers Pokemon EX. And yeah, I believe we're confirmed to be getting the trainers of, yeah, here, it features trainers Pokemon for Iono, Lily, and Hop. And also some cards from EX Star Deck Renovations. These cards are actually have the older regulation mark, which is the same as Prismatic Evolutions for most of those cards. Like, for example, this Blaziken EX. So that'll be rotating a year before, for example, this Mamoswine EX. So that's a thing. Does it really matter? Not right now, but that's a thing. And then we are going to be getting, I don't remember if it says here. Oh, yeah, so we're getting Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX and Steven's Metagross EX. We are also getting apparently Cynthia's Garchomp EX and some Team Rocket cards. And I believe we are also getting an Ethan's Pichu and the Misty's Psyduck. Something. I don't remember if that's exactly what it is. And I don't think that was ever confirmed. It was just kind of shown in a trailer. But we'll be getting some really cool things. Also, our second special set will be a Unova focus set, which is kind of cool, I guess. But keep in mind, this is not confirmed. And one other thing that isn't confirmed is that we're probably getting Mega Pokemon this year. It's not confirmed, but it's highly likely. Mega Pokemon in the regular TCG, I believe there is some. Were in the that's not a Mega Pokemon. Were in the X and Y era, and they were evolutions to EXs. Keep in mind these were capital EXs, so these were Pokemon that had they were all basics. So Blastoise EX here is a basic, despite obviously Blastoise EX in standard is a stage 2. So they won't work exactly the same. And the reason we think that they're coming back is because we got some new trademarks for the TCG that are I believe Japanese expansions, presumably Japanese expansions called Mega Brave and Mega Symphony. So that, heavily implies that we're getting a Mega Pokemon. And this is likely to correspond with Pokemon Legends ZA, which is really likely that we'll get probably one set focused on this, maybe some other residual cards from this idea, but mostly in one set, I imagine, maybe two. And we saw this previously with the expansion. I believe Astral Radiance was based on Pokemon Legends Arceus, and that's going to be, and that set like introduced, I really don't know a lot about their video games, but it introduced Radiant Pokemon, and it introduced cards focused on Origin Form Palkia V-Star and Origin Form Dialga V-Star, and some synergies with that. Ultimately, though, Mega Pokemon are actually like a mechanic, and they're definitely going to show up in, well, let's just take a look at, because like the Mega mechanic was a mechanic, but then we also got two cards. We got a Mega Sableye and Tyranitar GX card, and we got a Mega Lopunny and Jigglypuff GX card. These both feature Mega Pokemon on them, but there's nothing special about them being Mega Pokemon. We got other tag team cards, and the rest didn't feature Mega Pokemon and were the same as far as I'm aware. Obviously, these are just two cards, and I don't know why they have Mega Pokemon on them, to be honest, but they did, and they were just regular cards. So theoretically, we could just get like a random basic Pokemon that's just Mega Sableye. Is that likely? I don't think that's likely at all, but that is theoretically possible. However, and I talked about this with custom cards, but presumably we'll get some Mega Evolution and this is the Mega Blastoise, or it might just be M Blastoise EX. I don't really know how it's supposed to be said, but I've always heard it called the Mega Blastoise. And the Mega Evolution rule. These Pokemon are functionally very similar to Stage 1s as they evolve from basic EXs. But if Mega Blastoise EX came into the game, it would functionally probably be a Stage 3 Pokemon, essentially. A third evolution. And we had Pokemon like this in the form of Pokemon Break, which were really weird cards. They were like all golden and they were sideways, but they evolved from, for example, Greninja Break was like a Stage 3 Pokemon. Bronzong Break was like a Stage 2 Pokemon because it evolved Bronzor into Bronzong Break. But ultimately, it was not a Stage 2 Pokemon, so you could not rare candy your Bronzor into Bronzong Break. But the actual Mega Pokemon that we saw in the past had they were Pokemon, they had HP, they had normal stuff, and they had this Mega Evolution rule in addition to the Pokemon EX rule. It says when you when your Pokemon becomes a Mega Evolution Pokemon, okay, when you like evolve it, your turn ends. So that's something that was obviously like a big downside and like a really big downside. But then they printed these Spirit Link cards that just said like ignore that rule. Ultimately, I was never a fan of Mega Pokemon for this reason because this mechanic's interesting, big downside, but then you have like some big upside to counterbalance that. But then you have this tool that just removes the downside. But then it's essentially just, oh, you need to attach this tool to this Pokemon before you evolve it, which is kind of boring in my opinion. But regardless, this was the mechanic, but I would like to see it more like the break mechanic, where breaks were just single prizes, so theoretically they'd be two prizers now. But Pokemon Break were cards that allowed you to keep the previous like evolution, increased the HP, gave it a new attack or ability, but then kept the previous, I believe it kept the retreat cost and weakness and resistance, but then also kept the previous attacks and abilities of the like regular Greninja, for example, with Greninja Break, which meant that you had a Pokemon with, if you are playing Greninja from, I want to say Breakpoint, but that might be the wrong set. Regardless, if you know the Greninja, you know which one I'm talking about, the one with the ability locking attack, and it has two attacks, but now you give it the Greninja Break evolution. Now it has more HP, and now it also has an ability, which it like now it has three things. Right now we don't see Pokemon with three things, so we'll see what exactly happens with Mega Pokemon. They cannot return exactly like these previous Mega EXs because the regular EXs are a different mechanic than they were in what, like 3 eras ago or whatever in 2016 it says here. So we'll see what exactly Mega Pokemon look like, but they are essentially confirmed to be coming back, and I'm really excited for this. I wanted to see a cool new mechanic. I thought trainers Pokemon were cool theoretically, but nothing super splashy in terms of an actual mechanic, because as I said, they're kind of similar to stuff like Battle Styles or Paradox Pokemon. But I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the Pokemon TCG this year, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell. You could also join the channel as a member. But I hope you enjoyed, and as always, we said, see you in the next video.